I had never imagined my 79th birthday would feel like a battlefield. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, warm and golden, yet it couldn't touch the chill that had settled in my chest. My name is Margaret, and this house, Robert's and mine, was supposed to be a sanctuary. Every corner held a memory. The oak dining table where we celebrated holidays, the garden where he taught Daniel to throw a ball, the cozy armchair by the fire where I would sit with a book and a cup of tea. Daniel, my son, had grown into a quiet, tall man with his father's eyes and patience. I had always been proud of him, proud of the man he became. But recently, there had been subtle shifts I couldn't ignore. The way his smile sometimes faltered when Linda spoke, the hesitation in his voice when he answered my questions. Linda, she was charming at first, with laughter that seemed to fill the room and a presence that felt like a new branch of our family tree. I welcomed her, offered her warmth, and even trusted her with the little details of my life. But today, her charm was a veneer, thin and brittle, barely hiding something sharp underneath. Breakfast began like any ordinary morning, yet the tension was palpable. "Mom, are you really going to eat that?" Linda's voice snapped, slicing through the quiet. Her tone carried an edge that made me flinch. Daniel didn't respond. He simply watched, his silence louder than words. I forced a polite smile, though my hands shook slightly. I could taste the fear mingling with my coffee. By the time lunch arrived, the atmosphere had become oppressive. Linda controlled the seating, dictated the food I was allowed, and made thinly veiled jokes about my age. "You really shouldn't wear that," she said with a smirk. "People might stare." Daniel chuckled, and the sound felt like betrayal. I glanced around the room, my heart sinking. This wasn't just mockery, it was a quiet assertion of dominance. I retreated to the living room, pretending to admire the sunlight spilling across the furniture. The room felt unfamiliar, like walking into someone else's home while wearing my own skin. And in that quiet moment, a creeping suspicion began to take hold. This wasn't merely disdain. There was intention behind the cruelty. Something was brewing behind their smiles and laughter, something I wasn't supposed to see, but I could feel it. As I sank into the armchair, I resolved to observe carefully, to listen closely. The day would continue, but so would my vigilance. Whatever plans they were weaving, I needed to understand them before it was too late. Little did I know that the seemingly innocuous words and laughter of my own family were about to reveal a betrayal that would shake the very foundation of my life. The afternoons stretched long and heavy, each tick of the clock amplifying the unease that had settled in the house. Daniel moved through the rooms with quiet efficiency, his hands busy, but his gaze careful to avoid mine. I remembered the boy he had been, curious, warm, protective, and the contrast was like a blade twisting in my chest. Something had changed. Something had shifted under the surface of our family's familiar rhythms, and I could feel it with every glance exchanged between him and Linda. Linda, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on control. She floated around the house with an almost theatrical air, rearranging my belongings, questioning my choices, and offering helpful suggestions that were anything but. "You should sit here," she said sharply, guiding me to a chair near the wall during the mid-afternoon tea. "It'll be easier for you to reach things." Her words dripped with a mix of condescension and hidden satisfaction. Daniel smiled faintly, his silence reinforcing the quiet humiliation. I tried to remind myself that birthdays were often stressful, that tension could be fleeting, but the sharp edges of Linda's laughter and Daniel's muted agreement gnawed at me. Every interaction carried a subtle cruelty, like a seed planted just to watch me wither. I moved through the day cautiously, measuring my words, adjusting my posture, and biting back the irritation that bubbled beneath the surface. Later, in the kitchen, I overheard a conversation that tightened a knot in my stomach. I had gone to pour a cup of tea when Linda, thinking I was elsewhere, spoke in a tone that was dangerously casual. "Once she's settled somewhere else, the house is ours," she said. Daniel's quiet murmur followed, "and her savings too. We can finally live the way we want." I froze. My hand trembled slightly as I clutched the teacup, feeling the weight of their words sink into me. This wasn't just annoyance or cruelty. It was planning, calculated and deliberate. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined, not just because of what they intended to take, but because it came from the two people I should have been able to trust most. I retreated to the study, shutting the door softly behind me. My mind raced, sifting through memories of Daniel as a child, of Linda's smile when she first joined our family, of all the times I had welcomed them wholeheartedly. Each memory now felt tinged with betrayal, every gesture I had offered seemingly exploited. Sitting at the desk, I realized I needed help, someone outside this toxic bubble who could act decisively. My thoughts turned to Jonathan, Robert's old friend and a skilled attorney. Years ago, I had supported him in his early practice, never imagining that one day he would be my lifeline. I reached for the phone, my hands steady despite the storm in my chest. If there was a way to protect myself and reclaim what was mine, I had to act before it was too late. The house felt colder as the afternoon shadows lengthened. The laughter downstairs continued, but now it sounded hollow, strained. I knew the confrontation was coming, though not in the form I had expected. A quiet determination settled over me, a resolve that whatever the outcome, I would not be a passive victim. By late afternoon, the tension in the house had become almost unbearable. Every word Linda spoke felt sharp. Every glance Daniel cast seemed calculated. I had learned to navigate family conflicts over the years, but this was different. This was not a misunderstanding or a fleeting disagreement. It was a deliberate, silent siege on my life and my dignity. I watched them from the corner of the living room, pretending to sip my tea while my mind catalogued every detail. Linda moved with effortless confidence, her voice smooth and casual, yet each statement carried an undercurrent of mockery. "You really shouldn't try to lift that yourself," she said as I reached for a cushion. Daniel's quiet chuckle followed, as though he were in on a joke at my expense. My chest tightened, anger mingling with sorrow. I thought about Daniel as a child, how he had once rushed to protect me from scraped knees and harsh words, how he had laughed at my silly jokes and shared his dreams openly. That boy seemed miles away now, replaced by a man whose silence enabled cruelty. I felt a wave of grief for the son I had loved unconditionally, wondering when the distance had grown so vast, when trust had been replaced by complicity. Later, as I tried to retreat to the quiet of my bedroom, I overheard them in the hallway. Their voices were low, but unmistakable. "We'll have everything in place soon," Linda said. "She won't even see it coming." Daniel responded in a tone I barely recognized, calculated and cold. "Once the paperwork is signed, it's ours." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son, plotting to take my home, my savings, my security. It was beyond betrayal. It was a fracture that cut to the very core of my being. I felt my hands tremble, not with fear, but with a rising determination. I would not be quietly erased from the life I had built. I returned to the study, pacing as the afternoon shadows stretched longer across the floor. Memories of Robert, of our life together, and the years of care I had poured into our home collided with the reality of the present. My anger was tempered with clarity. I needed help, legal help, someone who could act decisively and protect what was rightfully mine. Jonathan's face came to mind, steadfast, experienced, a man I had helped in his early years. I picked up the phone, dialing with a steady hand, each ring carrying hope and resolve. The plan was simple yet powerful: remove myself from the toxic environment, secure legal measures, and take back control of my life. As the phone rang, I felt the weight of the day shift. Downstairs, laughter continued, but it no longer intimidated me. A quiet storm had begun within me, a storm fueled by betrayal, grief, and the unwavering determination to reclaim what was mine. I was no longer a passive observer in my own life. The confrontation had already begun. I just had to By evening, the house had grown heavy with shadows, both from the setting sun and the weight of secrets. I had spoken to Jonathan, Robert's old friend, and his calm, precise words had given me a sliver of hope, a plan to reclaim my life. But nothing could prepare me for what would come next. I lingered near the study doorway, pretending to sort through papers, when the sound of voices reached me from the living room. Linda's laugh, sharp and triumphant, pierced the quiet. Daniel's voice followed, low and conspiratorial. My heart tightened as I strained to hear, every nerve alert. "They won't suspect a thing," Linda said. "By the end of the week, the house is ours, and the savings too. Everything Robert left behind will be gone." Daniel's voice, calm but chilling, confirmed the plan. "Once she's moved, it's final. No interference, no chance for her to fight back." The words landed like stones in my chest. I had always known trust was fragile, but hearing my own son speak of me with such cold calculation was like stepping into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Every memory of Daniel as a child, the laughter, the tenderness, the shared secrets, was tainted now, replaced by the man he had become, someone capable of betrayal and deceit. I retreated silently to the study, hands trembling as I dialed Jonathan again. I explained everything, my voice steadier than I felt, each word a release of the tension I had been holding in for hours. He arrived within the hour, calm but commanding. Watching him move through the house, reviewing documents and preparing legal steps, I felt a surge of strength. For the first time that day, I knew I had allies who understood the stakes. When Jonathan confronted them, the transformation was almost theatrical. Linda's confident smile faltered, replaced by shock. Daniel's calm composure cracked, revealing panic beneath. Their plans, meticulously plotted, unraveled under the weight of the law and the resolve of someone they had underestimated, me. I stood quietly in the corner, observing their faces as Jonathan outlined the legal consequences, the protections now in place, and the irrevocable steps to secure my home and assets. The anger I had carried for months surged, but it was tempered by a profound sense of clarity. I realized that the betrayal, though painful, had awakened a strength I hadn't fully acknowledged in myself. Sitting later in the study, watching the sunset through the familiar windows, I felt a strange calm. The house, which had felt like a prison all day, seemed to breathe with me again. I had faced the betrayal, exposed the deception, and begun reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The confrontation had ended, but the lessons lingered. Trust, once shattered, could be rebuilt, but only carefully, and only for those who proved worthy. For the first time in days, I felt the stirrings of hope. The battle was not just over possessions or plans, it was over dignity, independence, and the affirmation that my voice still mattered, that my life still belonged to me. The days that followed felt surreal, a delicate balance between relief and lingering grief. Daniel and Linda had retreated, their plans dismantled, their arrogance humbled by the law and by the quiet strength I had summoned. The house, once a theater of subtle cruelty, seemed to breathe again. Sunlight filtered through the curtains differently now, softer, almost forgiving, as if welcoming me back into the life I had fought to preserve. I spent my mornings tending the garden, brushing my fingers across the roses Robert had planted decades ago. Each bloom reminded me of the life we had built, a life not defined by betrayal, but by love, care, and resilience. Jonathan visited occasionally, not as a lawyer enforcing justice, but as a friend who understood the weight of what had happened. Together, we reviewed the legal protections that ensured my independence would remain intact, but it was the emotional security I cherished most, the knowledge that I could trust my own instincts and strength, that truly mattered. I thought often of Daniel, of the son I had raised with patience and devotion. The betrayal still stung, a dull ache that resurfaced at unexpected moments. I realized that he, too, had been shaped by his own choices, by the influence of greed and selfishness, and that the man I once knew existed only in memories. Yet even in that realization, I found a measure of sorrow rather than hatred. The depth of disappointment carried its own lessons, teaching me that love and trust, though precious, are not guarantees. They are gifts that must be honored by those who receive them. Linda's presence, once overwhelming and suffocating, had vanished from the home. Her laughter, so long a source of unease, was replaced by the quiet rhythms of my own life, the kettle boiling in the morning, the rustle of leaves outside the window, the soft hum of the evening settling over the house. I allowed myself to breathe fully, to inhabit the space without fear or restraint, knowing that the sanctuary Robert and I had created was now truly mine again. In those quiet hours, I reflected on the journey I had endured, the humiliation, the betrayal, the mounting fear, and I felt a surprising sense of gratitude. It was not for the pain itself, but for the clarity it brought, the awakening of a resilience I had long underestimated. I had faced deception, navigated treachery, and emerged with my dignity intact. As night fell, I sat by the window, gazing at the stars Robert had always loved. A gentle smile crossed my face. My home, my memories, my life, these were treasures no one could take. And for the first time in many months, I felt the quiet, unshakable peace of someone who had reclaimed her world, her voice, and her place within it. Whatever the future held, I knew this. I would face it on my own terms, with strength, grace, and the unwavering knowledge that my life belonged entirely to